Hello and welcome to another episode of the Making Spaces podcast, a podcast about making space for yourself and others. I'm one of the hosts, Sarah, and this is
the other host, Josie.
And we are absolutely excited today because, we're always excited. Well, excited-ish. But today we get to reintroduce to you someone who last interview we had with him created an entire t-shirt. You are here because you belong here because you are here. That is something that he said last time. So we're so excited to have Coach Chris Rodriguez here again. Chris coaches folks, particularly people learning how to do their work without losing their soul. And so it is so good to have you here again, Chris. So we're going to ask a question. Are you ready for this? That we always ask, but you already answered it. Now you have to come up with a whole new answer. Or you can just reiterate.
I know, and I was thinking about that. Yeah. No, I knew answers every time.
Where is one of your favorite spaces and why?
Okay. So, honestly, lately, it's been this space that I'm in right now. So this is my office. And during the pandemic, when everything started, I was teaching all my classes virtually and meeting with all my clients virtually. So I was just moving furniture around in the house. And then finally, my wife was like, Chris, leave this room alone. So we made a compromise and we turned our guest room into my office and movement space. And, over the past, year and a half, but really the past 5 months, this space has been a place where I've done a lot of my own work. And yeah, behind me, people who are listening to the recording, you can't see it, but behind me, I have like this mural
Go to
of all
YouTube,
of my
so you can see it, friends.
Yeah, all my patron saints, Bruce Lee, Biggie, Nas, Kendrick Lamar, all those guys. But yeah, it's important to have a place where you can do your work, not just the work that you get paid for, but the soul work for sure.
Josie is moving next door, and
yeah,
it's true. And it's been cool to see they like redone the whole place, but the place that her partner and her are kind of deeming the work room is got like fantastic light all day long. And it just like makes my heart so happy that you're going to have that like place and space that has light, but also has air conditioning, which is important. But has, for you to do your creative stuff. I'm excited for that.
I mean, I resonate. The reason why we're kind of moving too is we live in a 1-bedroom. I mean, if you're on YouTube, you can see the mess behind me of boxes in the moving process. Pick up the keys tomorrow.
Woo-woo!
But I needed a dedicated space. I don't want my computer and my workspace to be in my living room anymore. I want to be able to separate my life a little bit and have my office and my workspace for my business, and then be able to have my life space, my living room where I live, my bedroom where it's only just for sleeping, and having all these designated spaces. I mean, I feel like people really forget that designated spaces are good for your mental health, your soul, your work.
I think that's what this has been about. Actually, I read like this time of being sheltering in place. I read this really interesting article very early on. I think it was from Dwell magazine that talked about even if it's you have a desk that you have to walk to, like don't stay in one room during the day if you can. Obviously, there's some privilege around that. But, for me, I live in a 1-bedroom as well. But I have, instead of having a dining room, I have my desk and my podcasting area. And it has to be separate from where my bedroom is. It has to be separate from, it's like your brain, I don't know. And maybe you can talk a little bit about this as someone who coaches folks, but like, it is so easy with, having phones and having just to work all the time. And I think it'll be great for creativity almost. And I think probably having your studio as your movement space, it's like, okay, when I'm in here, when I'm in this space, my brain is helped to move into the space when I do this thing.
Yes, no, absolutely. So one of the things I work on, I have this master class, soul life balance, and it's all about just creating these boundaries around your workday. I think we're good at doing the work, right? And most of us, if not all of us, we've built most of our identity around the work that we get paid for. But that is not the totality of our life. That is not the totality of ourselves. So having these moments in our day to create space and kind of unwinding the rubber band. So we're like so cranked up all day. And then instead of releasing that tension and that pressure with mindfulness or going somewhere else, what do? We get onto the most triggering, mind hacking thing that we have, our cell phone, right? And instead of unwinding, we just ramp ourselves back up even more, right? So that's one aspect. So even when we are separating the spaces, right? Like moving from, all right, my movement space, my office is here. I try to not take my cell phone into my bedroom, right?
Yes.
Or I'll walk around the block, and if I do have my cell phone, I'm listening to an audiobook, and I try to not engage with any kind of social media, and like having those kind of real breaks, because there's something about the physical, but then there's also something about the mental in that physical space.
Yeah, I'd love to ask both of you, because you're both partnered, and I think a little bit about how having your work bleed into spaces also can mean that like you're not fully present to the other. Do you think part of this, because you said, my wife was like, stop moving whatever it is. Have you guys set up spaces so that you can be present to your partner?
Wow, this is what we talk about in therapy. Thanks, Sarah.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's not a big deal.
Triggered.
I know. I do have an issue. I am a workaholic. I have accepted it. It's fine. I love to work. I've never known not trying to survive by doing things. I've always been kind of motivated by the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I thrive in that environment. It's great for me. But it's hard for me at 9 p.m. when something comes up not to do it immediately because I'm trying to spend time with my partner, which is why the second bedroom
I hear
is
that.
great because then I can close the door and say, that's a tomorrow thing.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. So, I mean, me and my wife, we both struggle with that because she's working on a doctorate right now. And then she's a nurse, but she's doing an interim position, which is a lot of emails, a lot of desk work, a lot of that virtual, just kind of facing and teaching. And there's almost, whereas, when she was on the floor, she could leave her shift and all right, she doesn't have to deal with patients anymore. But now, she comes home and she has a work phone, that she has to use, and both of us tend to move towards overwork. We just kind of naturally go there, and that's something that we've both struggled with those boundaries with. Hence, that's why I'm like, I need to figure this out, and I need to try to teach this to some people. But one of the best ways that we create that space is if you have a furry friend in your house. We take Mamba, our pit bull, on 3 walks a day, right? So the first 2, it's usually me, but the evening one, it's both of us. And then we have a lake that's right near our house. It's got a nice trail. And for us, getting out in nature, not even like straight up in trees in the forest somewhere, but just getting outside of the house together. That's a good one. And then even we have some chairs that are just sitting in front of our house. We don't have a backyard, or our duplex is facing the street, and it's not like gated, or people can see us or whatever, but we got these chairs. And lately we just, hey, let's go out, let's drink a glass of wine, let's I'll smoke my little cigar, we'll relax, we'll chill out. And just that little moment of changing the environment in that way. And it's like, okay, yeah, our cell phones aren't out here with us, our computers aren't out here with us. This is that physical separation that you were talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just last night was driving home and I saw this couple walking their dog, and they were walking hand in hand, and they were an older couple. And I was thinking, I love that, because in my mind I created a story where they've both been doing their separate things, and then they came together to walk this dog. And then I realized I think I've seen them walking their dog almost daily for the last year. And there was something lovely about seeing a couple that was holding hands walking with this dog. And I had just a beautiful moment of appreciating, oh, that's a neat, again, like I said, I created a story where they were both doing their separate things and then coming together for this walk. But I think that is a really neat thing to have, rhythms and patterns that make you have to have that separation from your work and your partner, because I think sometimes it's really easy for that to all bleed together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think another aspect of that too is there time for you as someone who's partnered with yourself, separate from work. So not you with your partner, not you with your work, but just you and your thoughts and your body and all the stuff that you're feeling. That's been becoming more and more of an important thing for me. Having that, making space for myself, as something that is expanding, for my relationships with other people, and even for my relationship with my work.
Yeah.
Do you schedule that time?
For me, it is naturally in my morning. We usually don't spend that first portion together, and typically she's out early, or even when she's home. I'll pop into the office, right? I'd read a couple poems, move a little bit, breathe, and then after that, when she's home, that's when we do our walk with Mamba, right? So it's like we don't wake him up till 9 a.m. So that whole few hours before that, that's my time.
Well, it must be nice to have a dog that my dog's up at 6:30. He wants to walk at 7. And he's not aggressive or anything. He just comes and stares at me and puts his paws on my chest. Like, okay, let's go, Mom. And
that's aggressive.
No, I mean, it's
crate trained.
Yeah,
Bam. That's me though. That's me.
Yeah, it's great, because for me, it's given me a pattern and a rhythm that I get up earlier than I used to. And the realization for me that I have a scheduled time now from 9 to 10 that is mine. And I put it on the calendar. Folks who can see my calendar know that. And that is I'm working, but I'm working on stuff that is for my future, and not because what I do is I get caught up in emails and phone calls and things that are all very important.
Yep.
We've got some really difficult situations at the church right now. So I'm spending a lot more time on the phone with people, or even texting them because they're going through trauma. And I think that it's so easy for me to then go, well, what did I do to push the ball forward for other things that I want to do? And so having that scheduled time, but it was the reality for me that was really hard and had some shame around it, which I would love to talk. I have always worked in offices that I had to be there early. And so the fact that I kind of don't start the work till 10 feels very like indulgent. But my reality is, with having an ADHD brain, with having the way that I have to have structure and schedule, but it was important for me that at 9 o'clock I start working on the stuff that's pushing my ball forward. And then sometimes I hop back into church stuff at 9:30 or whatever. But at least from 9 to 9:30, sometimes 9 to 10. And I had to schedule it even on, and it's been awkward because sometimes people are like, oh, I want to see it. And I'm like, nope, can't. I have an appointment.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, we're having a conversation about boundaries right now, right? And this idea that to not have boundaries is dangerous,
It
right?
is, yeah.
Not just for you, but for the other people. You remember that old Stephen King movie, book, The Shining, Jack Nicholson?
Yes.
Creepy, great, and that scene when he goes, when the wife comes and he's been working, they go to this hotel to work. He's working. He writes hundreds of pages and it says, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And it's just, that's all it is. And then it pans in and it's like, oh, freaking out. But the idea that this workaholic, that his work drives him so crazy that he literally tries to kill his family, right? That's the thing, right? So we muscle through too much, and then our lack of boundaries, we end up blowing through that stuff on other people, right? Mm-hmm. Passive aggressiveness, resentment, like bitterness, all that stuff. And it's just like, yeah, I don't have the space to help you right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The lack of boundaries is, I mean, I kind of working through this again in therapy. Sorry to mention therapy so much, but everybody should go to therapy. So whatever.
Everyone should go to therapy.
Yes. If BetterHelp wants to sponsor us, we're into it. Keep going. Sorry, Jess.
Yes. We're going through this idea that maybe I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which, as far as diagnoses go, isn't like a great one because it's just kind of, yes, you have pain. And my therapist threw out this idea that my partner and I had been talking about and saying like, hey, maybe your trauma and maybe your lack of boundaries are making your pain exist or worse. And a lot of it has to do with like family trauma and lack of family boundaries and creating these boundaries because emotional pain is so tied into physical pain. And I feel like sometimes we don't really consider our relationships in that boundary situation and the pain and the going crazy and trying to murder your family. We don't really think, hey, maybe this friend who's asking too much of me is making my life a little bit more difficult in whatever way that could be, in whatever physical manifestation that could be. And in not placing those boundaries, not only are you kind of being a detriment to yourself, but also to your friend, because your friend, you're not communicating. You don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. And they could also benefit. Everybody could benefit from boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. It's like, so, and continuing in this therapy vein.
Therapy.
Right? We want to be in flow in our lives, right? And there's this idea called the trauma vortex, right? Where it throws us out of flow. And most times when we get there, what we say is, all right, I'm gonna just fight my way out of this. I'm gonna just avoid stuff. I'm gonna minimize this stuff because I shouldn't feel overwhelmed, or I shouldn't feel like I don't have the emotional energy to be there for somebody, right? All the shame about it, which is very much cultural, very much in the professions that we've all been in our upbringing and tradition, very much there, and we never quite get out of it because we're trying to just act like it's not there. But what if I worked with that? What if I worked with that stuff? My teacher, Resma Menicum, I've been training with him. He talks about our pain and how a lot of times we ingest the pain and then we just spit it out on other people versus like metabolizing it and using it as something, right? So I think when I think of that in the context of boundaries, a lot of times the thing that's going on inside of us when we're being triggered by that other person and their lack of boundaries, our lack of boundaries, it's pointing us somewhere, right? It's pointing us to something. It's pointing us to a need. It's alerting us, hey, we need to either proceed with caution. We need to engage differently. We need to maybe take a different pathway. We need to maybe stop, right? Yeah.
I think it's you were asking earlier before we started recording about so I am like 5 weeks out from leaving my current profession for a little while. And there's a couple of things, and some I've shared publicly and some I haven't shared. One of the reasons is that I was noticing that my personality and the thing that makes me uniquely me was altering. And by that, I mean the level of frustration I had with people was not, I mean, I've always been the kind of person who I'm an easy forgiver. I am a person who grew up with a family who's incredible, but they've always asked, well, why is that person acting that way? It's always out of pain, right? So I've always known that the way people act usually has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own pain, but you start making excuses. And then for me, as someone who was a workaholic and is a workaholic and has all that sort of stuff, it was very easy for me to say, no, it's cool. It's fine. Yep. Nope. Yep. Be mean to me. That's fine. Absolutely. Yep. Your trauma is really important. And I realized after many, many years of those expectations that like in the last year and a half, I could feel the part of me that has always felt gracious and kind was a facade. And that my entire
Tell me more.
like, oh, I mean, faking it, like, yeah, great. No problem. Yeah, I got it. And I realized that there's passive aggressiveness and things in me that just aren't my integrity. And sometimes when you have a career that expects you to be kind, particularly when you're female, you just sit with this stuff. And for me, I don't have, my outlets are like running and I have a couple good friends that I can say, this happened, and but in general, I don't have a lot of places to go with that. And so the reality was I wasn't great at setting boundaries. And then I've been in a career that hasn't always celebrated boundaries for me. And then you've got really odd dynamics where your life, your ministry, your friendships, your work, everything is been all blended together. And so I, just as someone who had to push a hard stop to like reclaim and spend time with me and get back to the person that I think I want at a deep core to be. And that person is someone who is gracious and isn't faking it, but actually, because I shouldn't say I'm faking it, because deep down I really am like concerned about the person. And I really do feel this feeling of like, again, because of the family I grew up in and also just because of my training, to always know that there's a thing behind the thing. But for a little bit, I was like, all right, I don't think I could be disappointed with one more person. Like, and I think that's on me. And I think the exciting thing for me is I am really looking forward to not working with volunteers for a while. I'm really looking forward to not asking anything of anyone for a little while, and not and just kind of being on my, I'm gonna do the things that I'm gonna do and that I feel confident I can take care of, and not relying on other people for a little while. And that might sound odd, but I need to learn how to set boundaries in a way, clear communication, in a way that is both honoring to who I am and understanding my own worth, and not like, you know, but also is honoring to them so they know what expectations are. Because I think, it's easy to be disappointed with people when you haven't set expectations, right? It's like, I don't know if you guys get like that, but where you're like, oh, you didn't meet my expectation that I never told you to meet. So I think there's like
Right.
this, and when you're working with volunteers constantly, when you're working, you're just hoping a leadership team will gather around you, and then you just want to be grateful that they showed up. It's a really difficult space to be in when you're not in a healthy, like, feeling like you can be honest about how you're feeling, what you're hoping for, what your desires are, and these things. And I think it's always good to kind of hit a pause. And so I think that, when did I know I needed to shift out is when I wasn't being, in the words of my best guy friend, he said, your Sarah-ness is gone. And like, I still love people so much. I love people so much. And I'm tired of being disappointed, and I needed to take a break so that I could kind of re-enter in a
Uh,
healthier way.
there is so much there. Oh my goodness. Um, so the last time I was on the podcast, we've had conversations since then.
Mm-hmm.
But the last time I was on the podcast, I was actually doing the pastoring thing
Mm-hmm.
and the coaching thing. And shortly after that, I I transitioned out. So, the end of 2020 was my last month as a college pastor at my church. And when you talk about just not being able to be your complete self, and
Mm-hmm.
disappointment and all these things, I just, one of the things that came up for me and my wife was, it was very challenging to have my morality and my
Mm-hmm.
paycheck
Yeah.
coming from the same place,
Mm.
right? um and that standard, that organizationally there is a standard in that organization of what morality looks like, right? In the practices that I do personally, but also in the ways in which I engage with people, and the people who I open myself to, right? And that began to be more troubling for us to just kind of reconcile, like, man, I can hang out, I can play some music at church and everything, but I probably shouldn't be working at a church, because the there's a group of people who will never step foot in this place, and those are people who are very much in my life, and they come from all genders, um, gender identity, religions, all that stuff. And these are my, in a lot of ways, my tribe, and the people who've been gifted to me, right? So there is there's this thing that happens when you have to walk kind of two different ways, right? And um this is something that this is something that I've been like dealing with my whole life, and over the past few years, recognizing that, I've had to show up in a certain way in certain spaces. I've
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
to kind of soften my my blackness, my
Mm.
my culture. Um, I've had to not express certain ideas about beliefs. Um, and there's but so much, it's that Lauryn Hill song, lost ones.
Oh, I love that song.
You might win some, but you just lost one. That one is you. That one is yourself, right?
Yep.
And in some ways, over the past few months, I've been experiencing a little bit of grief. Grief for when you talk about losing that Sarah-ness, right? Who was I before I felt the need to perform to fit? Who's that soulful version of myself?
I think it's interesting because I'm super lucky that I didn't have to walk two different, because I am the lead, right? So I didn't have to walk two different morality versus like in any space, which has been super great. And I'm looking forward to, from this point on, helping other people and communities and spaces do a better job of letting people show up as their full selves. I think that for me is really the call in the work. And I'm so grateful. Like, as much as I say, like, it was in me, right? It's the people are amazing, right?
Right.
The people are amazing. It's that I myself know now, and I think I'll be able to help other leaders know how to set better boundaries for themselves, because I didn't do a great job out the gate doing that, because I wasn't given the framework for that. There was no, and so even if I can be a permission giver for people to be like, no, like, I need your Blackness to show up, whatever that, like, if I can be the permission giver for other leaders to show up and to invite other people to show up, because it's messy and it's hard. And I've done, there are places and spaces when I've done it well. And I think the other places are opportunities and learnings about, okay, this is what it really looks like. And this is the risk. And there's always a cost, right? There's always a cost. But like Lauren says, don't let that cost be you.
Right. I love it.
And I think,
Oh, go for it.
I was just going to say, I think that it's important to have permission givers, because we can talk about how we don't have boundaries and like it's all about what we've done or what we didn't do or whatever. But the reality of life and the world is that you do not have permission to be yourself and to set boundaries. And I mean, like you said, Chris, like you had to walk two different ways. And I, as a Latin woman, also had to do that. I mean, for a while anyways. I have one of my best friends is a Black male, and we went to a predominantly white university. And the two of us, he really, I mean, he was called Oreo. He really struggled with his Blackness in college. And then, but he thrived. He was a student leader and he did everything and he was the best and everybody loved him and he had all these friends. And he had a great time at college. Not looking back, but at the time it felt all right. And then I had the opposite experience where in college I was like, I don't give a fuck about anybody or anything. I've spent my formative years of my childhood being like, oh, Josie, you're exceptional because you speak eloquently, because you read all these books, because you present yourself as a little educated white girl instead of a chola from the hood or whatever. And there was no permission given to me to be anything else, because otherwise I wouldn't have been deemed an honor student, an AP student. I wouldn't have been deemed worthy of being educated as much as I have been. And once I got to college, I was like, well, I'm here, so I don't have to do anything else. But there was so much pushback. I was in so much trouble all the time because I was like, this is bullshit. Like, I'm not going to be and I went to a Christian college. So it's like, I'm not going to be this demure little Christian girl looking for a husband, trying to be a wife. I'm here to get educated. I'm here to do what I got to do. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm a little white girl anymore because I am educated. And I mean, AP is not like super academics. I was like, I'm smarter than a lot of you. So I don't have to be presenting. But even today, there's so much pushback from me being unapologetically who I am and placing these boundaries, because there is no permission in this world to be that way.
Yeah, I think there's that hard thing too about like when we are injured in that way, it's hard not to spill that out and like, F you world, I'm coming at you. And that's not how you want to be. And that's why I'm saying, like, for me, it's like I'm not I want to do a good job of like entering into the space as both fully me that can make space for you. And so I'm not coming, that's why I say I'm not blaming anyone else. And it's just a moment of like, okay, well, what do I need? It's not your responsibility to figure out what I need, and me making space for me, it shouldn't be, and that's that balance. And I think there's that, there is that beauty. I'm excited about helping other people figure out what that looks like and coaching people towards that. Cause I think that's kind of been a lot of your work, Chris, right? Like helping people know, like you say, it bleeds all over other people. It is not there's always a cost, and you're either going to pay it or somebody else is. So you gotta figure it out.
Right. Yeah. Oh man. There's so much in this. And a lot of times, we all went to our Christian universities.
I didn't, y'all.
Oh, oh yeah. You
went
didn't.
To Duke.
State school.
You just went to Duke.
State school and then Duke. But undergrad was state school.
But these experiences where, you watch the people you went to school with, and they're like totally like, screw the system, and they're like almost like anarchists, right? And I don't ever want to be that, but I felt like, that loss, that disappointment, that like, I had to be somebody else here. But a lot of times I'm catching people at that point, right? When those wounds are just kind of bleeding out. And it's interesting for me to hear you, Josie, say like in college, that's when you were like, you know what, I'm gonna be me. And talking about that and with the idea of permission givers, who are some of the people that gave you permission? I'm just curious.
There weren't a lot, let me tell you. But I had friends, and weirdly enough, I had a ton of bosses who were like, hey, you do you. You don't have to be this. You don't have to do that. And granted, that was as a result of me skewing towards the liberal offices in the school, like art. Art kind of does that naturally. Or the people who were in the missions office trying to like change the world in ethical ways. Like they're like, yeah, we need people like you. You don't have to be a demure little wife looking for a husband or whatever. So while they were few and far between, I did have very influential people, both on my level and levels above. And I think they're both equally important to have friends that allow you, who give you permission to be exactly who you are without trying to adjust you to fit into their life.
Yeah, I think that's so good, because it's like, Sarah, as you're talking about, the pain comes from in us, right? But the goodness comes from in us too, right? It's all there. Our superpower becomes that vice in a lot of ways. But whatever the case, showing up and dusting off the diamond, right? Taking it out of the box, like we talk about it, like it doesn't have to be a box. Maybe it's some other structure, some other new weird obscure looking framework. But yeah, you can't get there without being you. Like, you are necessary.
Yeah, right? You are necessary. I think, was it last year? It was a couple years before that, actually. I was, I, as a person of a Christian tradition, you love your neighbor as yourself. And I love to love my neighbor. But what I noticed in that sentence, because a guy that was actually working for us, who is amazing, and John is a spiritual director, and he and his wife moved out of town for her to finish her PhD. But John said to me, have you ever noticed in that sentence that it's assumed you love yourself? And he said, I think to love yourself, you have to know yourself. And he said, you can't love your neighbor unless you love yourself. And I was like, no. Like, I'm a good Christian. I love my neighbor. And he was like, yeah.
No.
Let's read that sentence again. I was like, no. But it has
You've
been
been exposed. But yeah.
Yeah, it took me 4 years to like
It's so
process the words that
okay.
he said that was probably just like a throwaway for him because he's one of these like deep still water people. But it's exactly what you're talking about. It's like you got to know who you are in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Open that
It's
box, look and see a diamond instead of being like, here's my crap. Because so often we're showing people our crap side and not willing to say, here are the things like I'm super good at, and owning that. And I think particularly for those of us who haven't fit the norm of what, well, all three of us don't fit the norm of what space has been made for, if we're honest, right? um and so like I have this like painful reaction when you tell me that your friend in college had to manipulate themselves to have a good time. But I can relate, right? I think all of us can, like, and in the moment, I mean, remember when you're in college, you're not fully formed. Any college student listening, you really aren't. Like, you are
Sorry to be the ones that tell you.
you're doing great and you're on your way, but there is still parts of you that are learning. And I mean, I feel that way at 40, right? Like, I still feel like parts of me are like wobbly new parts. And I think
yeah.
to have to learn that your acceptance and love is predicated on how other people feel about your, and it's so funny because you wonder, like, what was the, I love that question, like, who gave you permission? Well, who took the permission from you? Like, what were the
Right.
unconscious things that told you, like I have a friend who one time told me, like, I realized a long time ago I could be the trope of the funny black guy. And I was like,
Mm,
ooh,
Yep.
oh, or the
gosh.
trope of I'm the good student, Josie. Like, I'm the good student. That's what I am. That's who I am. Instead of Josie, like, who's Josie? And it's all appropriate, guys. It's
Mm-hmm.
all
Right.
development. It's all stuff we go through.
Right.
Like Father Rohr talks about that first stage. All of it is appropriate, but it's also appropriate for our eyes to be open and go, how have I been in this space? And then how has that prevented other people from being themselves in that space?
Gosh.
Hence why we all need to go to therapy, everybody.
BetterHelp did not sponsor this podcast, but
We don't know,
if you
actually.
would like
They
to,
might be.
maybe.
We,
I don't know.
please.
Maybe. Uh, our base, our base is belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Our base is nurtured. We live in a body that is trying to do everything to make us survive. And then we leave that body, and that same body is now still trying to do everything to help us to survive. And the land is trying to do everything to help us survive, right? And that is nurture is the baseline. Being connected, intrinsic value and love and belonging, that is the baseline. So when you say who took that permission, yeah, that's, I mean, I think we need to get people back to that. Like, hey, you understand that you belong first. You've belonged first. I find myself in these moments. Nature is a big part of my life, but it wasn't as a child, because in Irvington, New Jersey, you got to go in when the street lights come on, you know.
Right.
There's this group, there's this gang in like New York and New Jersey, stick up kids. They'd come down the opposite street in like a tinted out blue van. And when you see them down the street, it's like a Michael Myers movie, you better run, they're gonna rob you. This was the environment of my childhood. As an adult, I found nature as a place of safety and sanctuary. But sometimes I still find myself going into these spaces where my Black body is the only Black body there. And I have to remind myself, hey, you've always belonged. Belonging is first. You know, you are present here. And you didn't have to earn a spot uh to walk this road, right?
Yeah. There's that really great, I don't know if I talked to you about it or not, or even when we talked before, but the documentary about the kids who are from the urban area who end up becoming like championship rowers, and
Oh,
they're all from rival gangs.
I
but
love it.
but they have to figure out how to row a boat together. And I was listening to the interview with the guy who since then has really begun to take kids from urban environments into the environment, like into
Right.
nature. And he tells the story of, and his body, he says, my body can actually, I can, as I'm telling you this story, I can feel it in me. He would go, the first time he got on the water, he was like in the water, in the boat, with a bunch of guys. He was like, I mean, we were going to fight after school before, like, but all of a sudden they're out in the water. And if you've ever been in the midst of water, it's a kind of quiet that you don't get anywhere else. And he said there was a quiet, and all of a sudden, all of us, and we've talked about it since, had the experience of like, our lives are so loud because of the street, because of like, for like me, I don't even think about the fact that 55 is right there. There's a constant noise, but out on the water is when it was quiet. And he said, I could hear myself for the first time in my life. And I think about that as you are like talking about, yeah, now I get into the environment and I can hear myself.
Mm. Mm.
Such a good documentary, by the way, guys. Everyone should watch it.
I love it. I'm gonna go watch that. No, there's this idea that, and it kind of, for me, it kind of comes full circle with this idea of of making space. And you talk about the finally hearing myself. And y'all read Thich Nhat Hanh,
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness teacher. He talks about, emptiness, and this idea of emptiness is not empty at all. For us in the West, it's very oh, it can be empty, but but to be empty is to be empty of something, and it points to something. So a cup that's empty is, what's the cup empty from? Water, right? Like, and it's this idea of how making space for ourselves and emptying out the all the stuff that doesn't belong is actually expanding, is actually creating room for others, right? As we continue to make room for ourselves.
Yeah. I think it's a both end. It's a circle, right? And we were taught that it wasn't a circle. Like making room for ourselves makes room for others. Making room for others should make room for ourselves. Like it's a circle, and anytime the circle is off, the wheel can't turn well. And then being aware that the wheel isn't turning well and not pretending that it's driving the bus, I think is a lot of the work that you do. It's like, hey, let's talk about like, where are the points on this? Because something's clunking. So and even like Josie's body and dealing with like, well, maybe my body is clunky, and not that it's all in your head. Cause that's the thing about fibromyalgia. It's not a great diagnosis only because they can like literally through scans and all these things prove your body is having actual pain. Now, where is that source of that pain? It could be like a psychosomatic connection, but it's still real. But we have grown up being told that like people who have body pain that are like it's all attached. We've tried to pretend the wheel isn't a wheel. And so I think it's always hard and it's counterintuitive sometimes to like look at the wheel and look at different parts of ourselves and go, okay, as a way of making space for others, you know?
Love that.
What a great conversation, everybody.
So I secretly said, I miss you. So, hey, we're all busy. So why don't I just schedule some time to be on your podcast so I can talk to y'all?
I've just, Josie, this happens a lot. And I'm so time conscious, but we'll get in conversations with people. And then because Josie and I talk in real life. And so I kind of forget that we're recording this for other people. But I think that's like the beauty of conversation that like hopefully isn't, again, just for us, it's a circle, right? It's got this ability to like also include others. What's really fascinating, guys, and I'll say this before we ask you the closing question, but they're finding statistically that people are wanting sermons that are conversations more than just lectures. And I think it's exactly this reason, is that people want it to be a dynamic way of being present to it, so that it's not just like getting, because just like, so what am I saying? No one wants to listen to a podcast as just someone downloading information. Maybe some people do. But there really does seem to be there's something that's magic that happens. The spirit shows up, whatever it is, where when there are people making space for each other, there's this new thing created instead of that one thing that like, it's like a separate thing. And anyway, I just really value that we get to do that together. So
I love it.
Chris, I could talk to you forever. We're going to have you on again, obviously. So my question, obviously, or we can just talk as real humans in real time. We can do that. Question for you as we close out is, as you think about a tangible way for, and whatever part of the wheel it is, whether it's making space for yourself or others, what's something that pops in your mind today?
For me, I think about the way I made space for myself this morning, and I was just breathing. I don't talk fast. I'm not someone you think like, oh yeah, Chris is this fast communicator or this person that gets things done fast. I'm naturally slow, and I think a good way. But everything's so fast. Everything changes so fast. We're halfway through the year of the second year of a pandemic, right? It's just, everything's just going so fast, and making space for me, I have to just stop and breathe deep. Feel my feet on the ground, then I can show up for my friends on this podcast. I can show up for my wife. I've made space in my container for others because I decided to pause and breathe, right? So
I love that. Chris, where can folks find you?
All right. You can find me on IG at Coach_Chris Rodriguez. You can also follow me and just kind of find my programs, find my articles, and just my free offerings at CoachChrisRodriguez.com.
Easy peasy. Thank you so much for joining us. And Josie, where can folks find us?
Well, you can find us first and foremost on MakingSpacesPodcast.com, Instagram at MakingSpacesPodcast. You can find Sarah at Rev Sarah Heath on Instagram, and me at Josie Takes the World. And as always, you can find our friends over at irreverent_FM on Instagram or irreverent.fm on the interwebs.
Guys, thank you so much. We will see you next week, where we will be
saving a space for you. Bye.
Bye.